Friends, welcome to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It's not difficult for you, but it's nice for me. And we're starting. Please. Kyle, I was drunk and I didn't know what I was doing. I drank more than a few glasses. I do not know, maybe I was drugged with illegal substances? Anyway, I lost consciousness. Or maybe I was just in a drunken stupor. But when I came to my senses, realizing what was happening, I tried to stop everything. I really wanted to. But they didn't stop. There were too many of them. I think 2 of them were holding me while the others were doing whatever they wanted to me. I hated it all. I'm so ashamed. Susie looked at herself in the large mirror mounted in the closet door in the bedroom. She still had a figure, although her body was no longer as slender and toned as when she tied the knot at 22, and at 42 she was more rounded and soft, but still as delicate. The events of last night were proof of this. Of course, she was drinking at the club, but she was neither drunk nor drugged. In fact, she initiated most of what happened herself. It wasn't that the male strippers at her friend Beth's bachelorette party weren't ready for this. It was just that Susie was more ready. Of course, Kyle must not find out the truth. She knew Kyle loved her, really loved her, but she also knew what Kyle thought of those who cheated, especially about lost wives. Susie knew there would be no marital counseling, no reconciliation, nothing to stop dear old Kyle from filing for divorce and eventually getting it. Susie knew that she couldn't keep what had happened a secret, that the vicious pleasure of the adventure would sooner or later give her away. Kyle will instantly pick up on any changes in her behavior. She couldn't tell the whole truth, but she could weave the truth with fantasy, and with such a story she had a chance to save her marriage. When Susie's thoughts focused again, she noticed a movement in the mirror. It was Kyle's retreating back. Oh no, did he hear me? How much has he heard? Overcome with despair, Susie mentally pulled herself together. Kyle? Cute? It's you? There was dead silence in response. A fear that she had never felt before was born in her stomach and ran up her body, shoulders, arms, and finally reached her brain. In response, she whined plaintively. Her breathing quickened, and sweat suddenly broke out on her forehead and upper lip. Her armpits were soaked, and Susie smelled of fear. Susie tried to suppress the urge to run after Kyle, as she was afraid that her guilt would become obvious. No, it's better to act normal, even puzzled, no matter what reaction he shows. Susie slowly left the bedroom and headed for the kitchen. Her knees were buckling and her legs were shaking. She thought Kyle would easily notice the tremor shaking her body right now. He'll see her shaking all over, and he'll understand everything. Kyle? Honey, is that you? Susie asked quietly before entering the kitchen. No sound reached her ears. Susie went into the kitchen, but it was empty. A disappointed sigh escaped her mouth. Where is he? In the office? Or did he go to his precious garage to tinker with this old junk? It was a good thing Kyle wasn't in the kitchen. Susie was so tense with excitement that she wasn't sure if she could lie at the moment. It's better to calm down before trying to find a husband. Having made her decision, Susie busied herself with cooking dinner. Pretty soon, fussing in the kitchen, Susie completely forgot about her nervousness. An hour later, dinner was ready, and Susie calmed down, enough to meet Kyle face to face and carry out his deception. Kyle, dinner is ready, she shouted. A couple of minutes later, she heard the front door open and close. Heavy footsteps crossed the living room floor, the sound fading as the footsteps headed down the hallway. Susie assumed that Kyle had gone to wash, and a few minutes later her guess was confirmed. When Kyle entered the kitchen, his hands were clean, and there were still grease and dirt stains on his clothes. Without saying a word to Susie, Kyle sat down and began to eat. He didn't even look at her. Feeling slightly discouraged by his silence, Susie sarcastically asked, Couldn't you have told me you were going to work on that pile of garbage of yours before you left me alone? The only response she got was a grunt while Kyle put food in his mouth. Why did you come in through the front door? I thought you were in the garage. You could have come in through the kitchen door, Susie said, trying hard to engage Kyle in conversation. His only response was to chew his food even louder than usual. Wisely deciding to back off for now, Susie lapsed into sullen silence. She knew Kyle was angry, but for what reason? Was he angry that she had been away until dawn? Susie didn't get home until after 2 in the morning, maybe even closer to 3. She couldn't remember exactly, despite the fact that she didn't drink much when the intense activity of that evening began, with numerous hard-naked bodies, A long drive home and a subsequent shower. The idea of how she went to bed was more a blur of vague, scattered memories than any clear picture. The thought of yesterday's prank almost brought a smile to Susie's face, but she managed to hold it back before she gave herself away. A quick glance away from her meal convinced her that Kyle was more interested in what was on his plate than what might be on her face. Relaxing again, Susie wondered again if Kyle had heard her earlier. If you've heard, she'll explain everything easily. She will explain that she was nervous, ashamed, and afraid of what Kyle would think and say about her rape. That's why she tried to find the right words, both for him and for herself, because she was also trying to come to terms with it. This is the reason for the verbalization of her thoughts earlier. Satisfied with her logical reasoning, she felt even more at ease and finished her dinner with a pleasure she hadn't felt in a long time. When he finished eating, Kyle got up from the table, left the kitchen, and headed to the garage. Later, before going to bed, he took a shower and immediately went to bed, immediately falling asleep, without saying a word to his wife all evening. Susie, tired from last night's lack of sleep, wasn't too worried about Kyle's behavior. She felt able to deal with his anxiety, and tomorrow would come soon enough to resolve everything. She soon fell asleep, and a slight smile graced her usually relaxed face. Soon the bedroom was filled with only the sounds of breathing, one slow in a steady rhythm, the other uneven and intermittent. Friday. Beth, this is Susie. Please call me. This was the third call Susie had made to her best friend today. Beth usually either answered right away or called back quickly. It wasn't that Susie was too worried about Beth's silence, after all. Her wedding was only 2 days away, and the poor thing still had a million things to do before walking down the aisle. Susie just wanted to make sure that if Kyle accidentally bumped into Beth or the other girls who attended the bachelorette party, they wouldn't say anything bad to him. Kyle's taciturn behavior the day before, which lasted into the morning, was unusual for his usually cheerful, sociable morning self, which for Susie was a crucial cause for concern. Sighing anxiously, Susie went back to work. She wasn't really able to concentrate, but she had to at least pretend to be working. Kyle, I'm home. Where are you, darling? Susie knew Kyle was home because his SUV was parked in the driveway. In fact, if she remembered correctly, the SUV was in exactly the same place as yesterday. Didn't Kyle go to work today? Is he ill? Why hadn't he told her this morning? Kyle, where are you? Silence was her only answer. Anxiety caused by fear and uncertainty quickly ran through her body, sending tingling shards of ice through her heart. Susie ran up the stairs to their bedroom. It was empty. She ran to the closet and opened the door. A nervous sigh of relief escaped her lips. Kyle's clothes were hanging there. Not a single shirt or trousers seemed to be missing. His shoes were neatly placed on the floor of the closet, and everything was also in place. Susie backed away until her feet touched the edge of the mattress and she abruptly sat down on the bed. Where is Kyle? His SUV is parked in the driveway, so he should be at home. He never went anywhere unless he was driving himself. Then a thought struck her, and a slight smile lit up her face. He's working in the garage on his old stuff, that's all. Today is Friday. Kyle left work early, returned home, and started working on his project. Jumping up with renewed energy, Susie jumped up and practically danced towards the garage. Opening the kitchen door leading to the garage, she went down the stairs and said cheerfully, Kyle, I'm home. How is yours? The garage was in darkness. His ramshackle car stood in the center of the garage like a gloomy, shadowy hulk, but Kyle wasn't there. Heck, where is he? Hurrying to the garage, Susie walked through the kitchen and looked out the window overlooking the backyard. The courtyard was small, so it was easy to see if anyone was there or not. Kyle wasn't in the backyard. Feeling nervous again, Susie went all over the house in search of her husband. No, he wasn't anywhere. Her nervousness quickly turned into anxiety, and then into fear. Had Kyle abandoned her? Would she hear the doorbell ring and there would be a court courier handing her legal papers? Papers that will turn out to be a divorce petition? Kyle will be home soon. He must have left with one of his friends. Somewhat reassured by this thought, Susie began to cook dinner. By focusing on cooking again, she managed to forget about her worries for a while. Having finished cooking dinner, Susie sat down at the table. With every bite of food, disturbing thoughts raced through her mind. Kyle had never left for so long without telling her where he was going and how long he would be gone. Now, Susie was sure Kyle had heard her rehearsing her excuse. An excuse that now seemed unconvincing and was getting more ridiculous by the minute. Why did she do that? To be honest, she didn't have an answer. Kyle could be tiresome sometimes, but overall he was a good person, a good husband. He doted on her and could always share a funny story with her. Still, sometimes she didn't want to hear what he was saying. However, as an obedient wife, she sat quietly, listened, and sometimes even laughed at his stories. Moreover, they rarely quarreled, and on the few occasions when they did, he never raised his voice or raised his hand at her. No matter how idyllic her marriage seemed, there had to be something missing in it. Otherwise, she would never have done anything to ruin it, right? Or maybe she was a hidden cheater. She had fantasies involving more than one man, at least two men at the same time. Although she wouldn't mind three, one for each of her three holes. She had never shared this fantasy with Kyle. First of all, Susie was sure Kyle would take it the wrong way. Secondly, Kyle wasn't in any of her fantasies. Not that Kyle was a bad lover. To tell the truth, Kyle tried very hard to please her in bed. He always wanted to try something new. She even liked some of them, but she rejected most of them. Despite this, Kyle always made sure that she experienced the best moments, and she was testing them, most of the cases. It wasn't that she was faking so many moments, although there were a few times when she was just making the right moves. She couldn't blame her husband for those few times. It was at that time that Susie thought her marriage and love were a little outdated. Naturally, now Susie wished Wednesday's party hadn't happened at all. The position she had put herself in was a sure path to self-destruction. In fact, when she questioned her actions and motives, the vicious pleasure that filled her yesterday and most of today was washed away, leaving only a sense of guilt for her infidelity. It took a little more time for Susie to reflect on her life and the paths she had chosen in it. In the end, Susie came to the conclusion that honestly, nothing in her marriage could justify her cheating on Kyle. Even after making this decision, Susie still didn't understand what drove her to commit adultery. It was already dark when she sat thinking about her life and waiting for her husband. She ate a little, but the plate was still more than half full of already cold food. She lazily noticed how tasteless it was. When she raised her head, her neck creaked, sending pain from herself into her shoulders. I wonder how long she's been sitting like this. A glance at the kitchen wall clock gave the answer to this question. It was a little after 9. She sat almost motionless for more than 2 hours. With a tired sigh caused by the pain in her lower back, she got up from the table. Susie automatically began to clean up after herself. After a few minutes, she put the food away, although she hesitated for a moment, fearing that Kyle would be hungry when he returned home. But then a surge of anger swept through her, washing away her anxiety. Kyle had been out all evening without saying a word to her, without letting her know where he was, so wherever he was when he got home, he could damn well worry about his stomach on his own. With quick, angry movements, she finished cleaning and decided to take a bubble bath. She was tense and she really needed to relax. Susie began to suspect that Kyle was playing some kind of game, staying away to repay her for coming at such a late hour on Thursday morning. Well, she wasn't going to play that game, and a moment later Susie was soaking in a hot tub full of bubbles. It was about 11 o'clock when Susie dried off and dressed to go to bed. She still felt the pain of the love she had 2 nights ago, but the bath helped ease that too. Relaxing, she lay down, expecting that she was about to fall asleep, but the other side of the bed, devoid of the presence of her snoring husband, in some strange and unexpected way, disturbed her. Susie considered calling Kyle on his cell phone, but quickly dismissed the idea as soon as it occurred to her. She wasn't going to fall for his tricks, and she certainly wasn't going to give in first. Yes, she cheated, but until that happened, it was just a fantasy, so she didn't plan it. It was a stupid mistake. It was a terrible mistake that would bother her for years to come, but she would never admit that she had cheated. She didn't want to lose her marriage. She loved Kyle. Deep down, she knew she would never make that mistake again. So why flaunt it? It's just going to hurt everyone, and it's not going to solve anything. She felt like she couldn't feel more guilty than she did right now. No, she would bear it alone, hoping and praying that Kyle would never find out about it. If he finds out, well, she refused to pursue the idea further. The best thing was to keep acting like nothing had happened, to act like the whole time they were married, and that meant not calling Kyle. More or less satisfied with her logic, she settled herself comfortably and slowly sank into a serene sleep. The sound of the door closing wasn't too loud, but it made Susie wake up and instantly alert. She saw a dark figure moving in the bedroom. Is this really Kyle? She asked herself anxiously. The figure walked slowly and very quietly into the bathroom, closed the door without closing it completely, and with the click of a switch, the light in the bathroom illuminated a small vertical slit with diffused yellow light. Susie lay still, listening. She was sure it was Kyle. Who else could have entered the house and done something so mundane? But what time is it now? Looking at the glowing numbers on the alarm clock, Susie noted with some annoyance that it was already 2:55. Where has Kyle been all this time? He hasn't been this late in years. Had he been drinking? Drowning your sadness? Susie was about to yell at him, demanding to know where he had been and why he had come so late, when she heard his voice. She couldn't make out what he was saying because he was speaking softly, so she slowly got out of bed, trying not to make any sounds. As Susie quietly approached the bathroom door, his words reached her ears. To think about it. She said she just wanted to talk. She was so angry that I didn't understand what was going on. She said she wanted to talk. We had a few drinks while we were talking, and then, I don't know how it happened, but somehow I woke up in this motel room. I felt very drunk, and there was someone on me. When I saw what was happening, I tried to resist. But he was still drunk or maybe high on illegal substances. I barely had the strength to breathe, let alone fight back. I was held down by several women, and each in turn attacked me. I'm sorry, darling, but it's not my fault. What's Kyle talking about? Is he saying he was raped? A lot of women? Susie asked herself with growing anger, listening to her husband from the shadows of the bedroom. How can a woman rape a man? Susie asked herself. He must be a willing participant to have a boner. Filled with anger, she slammed open the bathroom door, stormed inside, and came face to face with her husband. He was standing naked in front of the mirror. It was obvious that he was going to take a shower. Tilting her head in the direction of her wife, Susie saw that Kyle was not surprised, but only grinned. You're a fucking asshole. No one raped you. Who were you with? Is that the girl from your office, the stupid secretary, Brianna? Susie screamed in pain and anger. I'm going to take a shower. We can talk when I'm done, Kyle replied calmly and distantly. To wash off the stink of that fool? Fools? No, I want to talk now, Susie blurted out loudly. Ignoring his wife's demand, Kyle stepped into the already working shower. Angry at his indifference, Susie briefly considered getting him out of the shower, but the thought was too desperate, so she hated it. And instead, Susie retired to the bedroom to wait for Kyle. A few minutes later, Kyle came into the bedroom wrapping a towel around his pelvis and hips. You're an asshole. How could you? How could you cheat on me? Susie was filled with remorse, shame, and guilt even as she asked the question, but she couldn't help herself and continued to vilify him for another minute until Kyle raised his hand to silence her. He hasn't said a word yet. Breathing heavily, Susie closed her mouth. She didn't know what Kyle would say. Maybe some lame excuse. She just knew that if she didn't like what she heard, she would resume her verbal attack. After making sure that his wife was not going to continue her speech, Kyle went to the dresser, pulled out a drawer, and took out underwear. He threw off the towel and slowly began to dress in front of his wife. This innocent gentleness created uninvited thoughts that pierced her mind. The last thought made Susie almost throw up. She was about to say something when Kyle suddenly spoke up. You know, she called me, to the office. She said she needed to talk to me. It was Beth. Whatever it was, she refused to discuss it over the phone. She insisted on a face-to-face meeting. Naturally, I was puzzled. And yet I decided that it had something to do with the wedding. He stopped to pull on his t-shirt. She also insisted that we meet here at the house. At first I balked. I had a lot of work to do, but she said it was very important. So I agreed. When I got home, she was already here and waiting. I thought we'd go inside and talk, but she insisted that she wanted to go somewhere else to talk, and that we have to drive the same car, hers. Moving away from the dresser, Kyle went into the bathroom and took his clothes off. When he came back out, he began emptying his pockets and folding his clothes. Susie was too confused by what Kyle was saying to try to answer. Instead, she waited patiently for him to continue, her anger subsiding for a moment. We found ourselves in some kind of club. It was already well past noon, so it wasn't really very crowded there. She took me to a fenced-off area so we could talk in private, as she said, and ordered us a couple of drinks. Hearing her husband's casual words, Susie felt herself starting to shake. She felt the blood slowly drain from her face, leaving behind a tingling chill. At first, we talked about the usual topics, how things were going and all that. Then 3 more women appeared. I recognized one from a party we once attended. The other two were unfamiliar to me, but everyone said they knew you. While we were talking, it was nothing but ordinary shit again. We knocked over a few more glasses, and then everything became interesting. Somehow I lost consciousness. Unable to help herself, Susie squeaked in disbelief. What? Yeah, Kyle confirmed. When I came to, I was lying down. I was cold. And do you know why I was cold? Because I was completely naked. Can you believe that? Kyle asked with a sad laugh. But everything was getting even more interesting. When I woke up, I found that the bed was shaking. As it turns out, it's Beth riding me, and she rode me like some kind of stallion. By the way, she was naked too. Listen up. She reminded me of you 20 years ago. Susie understood what Kyle meant. Beth was 28, and she still retained the firmness and elasticity of youth. And yet, comparing her then and her now was insulting. This also caused Susie's anger again. Needless to say, but I will. I was completely baffled by what was happening. I asked myself, how did I get there? How did Beth set me up so easily? So I asked. In fact, I was so angry at being used in this way and without prior consent that I roared. Nothing good came of it. Beth was so carried away that she didn't even seem to hear. And if she did, she didn't seem to care. When he finished folding his clothes, Kyle turned to face the chest of drawers and began to sort out the things lying there. Susie sat mesmerized by her husband's story, so stunned that she couldn't speak yet. I tried to sit up, and then I noticed that someone was sitting on my legs. My arms were stretched out to the sides, my wrists were tightly gripped by someone else's hands, and my palms were just as tightly clenched in something wet and soft. I couldn't see who was sitting on my feet because Beth's heaving body was in the way, but from the sides I could see the same two new girls from the club holding my hands. Besides, they were both naked. Susie has heard enough. However, she was so furious, so angry, that all she could do was hiss, spitting out her bile. I understand, right? What kind of woman doesn't at least cut her hair there? Kyle agreed with his wife. Anyway, I decided that the girl from the party was holding me by the legs. Mind you, I still felt weak and dazed, so no matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't get out of the girl's arms. Are you still listening to me, Sue? Getting to her feet, Susie said to no one in particular, I'm going to kill her. Wait, honey, I need to tell you something else. Turning quickly to Kyle, Susie said with disdain in her voice, I don't want to hear the rest of your story at all, Kyle. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. How could you and she... she's my best friend. She was my best friend. Why did she do this to me? That's exactly what I'm coming to. Can I continue now? Okay, Kyle, but I don't want to hear the details. Not a single word about love, Susie said coldly. All right, dear. She moved to hold my legs, replacing another girl who immediately started climbing on top. Kyle, Susie warned, drawing out his name. Sighing, Kyle looked directly at his wife and said, Look, Sue, I'm the victim here. I was kidnapped by 4 lovesick women who used me against my will. Why this happened will become clear in a moment. I really think you need to hear what I have to say. Okay, but don't talk about love. So, this is the girl from the party. By the way, her name is... Kyle began, but Susie interrupted him. I don't care about her name. I don't want to hear anything at all. But since you seem so determined to tell me everything, I'm listening, but don't push it, Kyle. I'm not sticking it out. But in order to make sense, everything must be told consistently. Okay? Besides, you're the one who wanted to talk. That's what I'm saying. Caught off guard by Kyle's raised voice, Susie just shrugged. Like I said, this girl, Shanna, was at Beth's bachelorette party, just like the other 2 girls. So, as Shanna continued to move on top of me, things got even more interesting. Watching his wife's reaction, Kyle continued. Beth started explaining something. The first thing she said was that she wanted to get even. Noticing that Sue was about to say something, he beat her to it by saying, Wait, don't interrupt, Sue. Don't say a word until I'm done. If you leave this room before I'm done, I won't discuss this anymore. The look she gave him could have frozen hell, but she didn't say a word. Instead, she hissed in displeasure and began pacing the room again. The second thing Beth said was that she didn't believe that a man could be unconscious and still have an erection. Unconscious, perhaps this is too much, since she was referring to a drunken swoon, which is actually semi-consciousness. You see, obviously someone was making love to her fiancé while he was drunk and passed out. Are you still with me? A sickening feeling began to displace the anger Sue was holding back. Her stomach twisted and she suddenly felt sick. Sue looked down at her feet. quickly swallowing the sour bitterness that rose to her throat, burning it, while Kyle's words rang in her ears like crazy church bells. I was a guinea pig to see if a man could get an erection under the same conditions as Beth's fiancé, Andy. Obviously, he wasn't lying, which put Beth in a sticky position because she didn't believe him, and now you won't know until you try, so to speak. Thirdly, Beth explained why I was chosen. Apparently, you've let go of the brakes completely. You've been drinking a lot. I can understand letting off steam, but you went a little further. Isn't that right, Susan? When his wife refused to look up, preferring to remain silent, Kyle continued. They all saw you making love to two men, and then you disappeared. When the girls noticed that you were gone, they got worried and went looking for you. They noticed your car across the street, parked in the same motel where they've taken me now. Can you imagine that? What a coincidence. So, after they had a nice talk with the receptionist, he gave them a key card, and they went to the room you rented. In fact, it was the same room they took me to. He must be one of the popular ones. Anyway, thinking that you were sleeping there, they decided that they could join you, since they were pretty drunk too. Only they weren't so drunk that they didn't understand what they were seeing. After pausing for a few seconds to wait for his wife's reaction, who only moaned softly, Kyle continued. They saw you and Andy making love like two rabbits. Well, you were the only one actually making love, but Andy wasn't completely unconscious, as they saw that he was moving a little bit too. I think even dead drunk people react by making love unconsciously. So now you understand the reason for my abduction and subsequent use. Anyway, by the time all the girls had done their thing with me, I had sobered up, regained my strength, and was fully conscious, but the job was already done. When the last girl got her way, Beth called Andy to apologize for not believing him. Unfortunately, she also explained why she believes him now. Needless to say, Andy wasn't happy. Not at all. He was so upset that he canceled the wedding, breaking off the engagement over the phone. So don't worry about Beth's wedding because now she's not going to be there. Looking at his wife, he saw how much she was suffering. He wasn't intentionally trying to hurt her, but he wasn't unhappy with her pain either. Well, that's it. The final. Do you have anything to add to what Beth said? Shaking her head, Susie said softly, No. Okay, then I'll go to bed. Damn tired. It was a long day and an even longer evening. In a barely audible whisper, Susie asked a question that filled her heart with fear. Will you divorce me? Kyle sat down on the bed and yawned. Beth and the girls confirmed that you were high and drunk, so this time I'm going to leave it as it is because as far as I know, you've never done anything like this before. However, Beth is not so forgiving. I doubt she'll call you anytime soon. As Kyle reached to turn off the bedside lamp, he heard Susie ask another question. In a low voice, his wife asked, Kyle, did you like it? I mean, how did you manage to hold out for so long? Turning his head towards her, he chuckled slightly. Oh, that. Well, after the girls picked me up while I was unconscious, Beth took advantage. What did she call it? Oh, yes, an erection ring. Imagine an erection ring. God, this thing actually works. Thinking back over the last few hours, Kyle remembered something else. Just so you know, girls have been putting condoms on me. Beth apologized, but said that since you and I are making love, she doesn't want them to get anything that you can give me. And I hope you didn't give me anything, Sue. With that, he turned off the light and settled back, already half asleep. In a sleepy voice, Susie's husband said one more thing. By the way, Beth said we could get drunk again sometime. Good night, darling. Soon, the only sounds audible in the bedroom were breathing in a slow, steady rhythm and uneven sobbing sobs.